Welcome back to the Azure Essentials Show. I'm your host, Jacob Bendfeldt. Joining me today are Vijay Mital, Corporate Vice President and Chief AI Transformation Advisor at Microsoft Research, and Ulli Homann, Corporate Vice President and Distinguished Architect in our Cloud and AI business at Microsoft. In this episode, which is part of our series on essential AI for businesses, we're talking about data as a corporate asset in the GenAI era. All right, so thank you again, Ulli and Vijay, for being here. This is our second session today. And today we will be focusing on data as a corporate asset in the GenAI era take. I'm extremely excited about this conversation today. So let's get going. I mean, today we focus on data as a corporate asset in the GenAI era. Right? I mean, over the last few years, the world has become more and more data-centric. I mean, more and more data is being produced every day than ever before. And techniques like business intelligence, business analytics are bringing data into every decision process and into every decision point. So let me ask the two of you in this session today. We'll cover multiple angles, but what is new? So keep that in mind, what is new? And how people should think about data in a sense of what changes because of generative AI. So what's new and what changes? Ulli, can I ask you to tee us up?
Yeah, of course. And first of all, thank you for inviting us again for a second time to talk about generative AI and its impact on business, because I think that's really the focus of the session. However, business doesn't happen without having unique points of view, and unique points of view are obviously lots of business transformation, but there's a lot of data that actually substantiates what a company is all about. And we are seeing now that unstructured data that's coming from devices, that's coming from cameras, that's coming from all sorts of places, is becoming the larger volume of data. We always think about data in terms of structured data from ERP systems or CRM or other things, but now we are seeing the volume shift to the non-structured side of the house, partially human, because we shouldn't forget that human beings in an organization create a lot of data that's of interest to everybody, but then you see systems generating the bulk of data. So from my perspective, that's really changing. That has been going on for the last 10 years, but I think now we are seeing a crescendo because we were generating the data, but we didn't do anything with it. So GenAI is really the change agent that allows us to take all that data and do something interesting with it. Vijay in the last conversation was effectively talking about how multi-modality is something that's important. We didn't really dive into that a little bit, but think about a system. We today understand images. We understand voice. Now we are going to see models, I'm sure, emerging that understand video. And once we do that, the systems become super powerful and really can tap into the world's knowledge around cameras and so forth. So I think that's really, really important. Then having partners that have the right infrastructure for you to be able to harness all that information. And we won't go into the technical details. There are other sessions out there, but effectively allowing you to take technologies that vectorize data and so forth and make that available so that these GenAI models can consume them. So from my perspective, that's really, really critical. Understand what data you have, bring it into the context of AI, and then let the AI systems start to make sense of all that data so that you can harness or harvest the value that's in that data. So from my perspective, let's go from there. Vijay, when you're looking at it from a business transformation perspective, let's really focus on that part of the equation today and look at now you have data. Lots of it is available in the right format. Now, what can you do in order to move the business forward?
So thanks indeed, Ulli, and thanks, Jacob, for inviting us here. So Ulli, you've covered all the bases around data, how new kind of data is getting interpreted and so on. So I'll just add three things. Firstly, it is possible now because of pre-training models and the amount of data that these giant models are already bringing. It is possible for people to operate in low data areas. Previously, you just couldn't do it. Now you can. That's the first part. Because
Vijay, you're using a term that's really cool. I love it. Low data environment. Can you expand a little bit on this? Because I think that's a really important concept.
So let's say I'm a bank that is getting for the first time into advising on wealth to startup founders and so on in various stages of their life. And they haven't done that work before. So they have low data of transcripts of advisors. But now, if they can get an expert or two on give 5 examples, 8 examples from that, generative AI, LLMs can start extrapolating and dealing with a whole host of situations. So that's a low data environment for me, but of course the world has a lot of data. So that's the first one. So you can get into those areas.
So you compose effectively what the model already knows with few examples of what you think is highly relevant, and that makes then the unique setup for a business transformation.
Absolutely. The second one is, until now, we've thought about data saying, I don't have enough patient data, I don't have enough consumer data, I need to sample more consumers. Yeah, that still remains. But multi-modality, which you covered, Ulli, changes how we think about data. If I add background noise, am I going to understand what is happening in this meeting better? It's a customer meeting, and I'm trying to understand which objections remain, which claims are raising eyebrows. Understanding the background noise, the posture, the movement of people. Suddenly you have to say multiple modalities. If I gather more modalities, am I at an advantage? So that's another way to think. We haven't really thought about that before. And the third one is we are now in an era where we can actually synthesize data. So yes, you can do molecular simulations, and when we have quantum, we'll be able to do an awful lot more and generate data for AI, but there are other ways of synthesizing data. And LLMs are getting really good, at least in some areas. If you give them good examples, you say, now create me more samples. So they are the 3 things that I see.
I think that's a really important element that you just brought in there, Vijay, because synthesis of data can mean many things. So what you're really saying is that the LLMs are starting to, based upon examples, are able to create more data so that we can process more intelligently, especially focused on a business element that you might not have a lot of data about.
Absolutely. It's all about speed, and you can go into areas you would not have ventured before.
So I want to talk about value for a minute, because I think let's dive a little bit more into that. So people have long thought about data as a corporate asset, right? I mean, it's been a currency or even a mode. But GenAI is taking things to a different level, right? As you're saying, it's a different world. So as we've been working with market leaders on GenAI-led transformations, I'm seeing a shift in how data is valued. I mean, how do you think about that? I mean, what's new? Does the data ownership drive decisions at a higher level? Things C-suite, board, M&A. Vijay, any thoughts on that?
So thanks indeed, Jacob. So I'm going to start with an example. So this is a company that's a market leader, very well resourced, and they have a rule for getting into new businesses. They say 2 of the following 3 things must be satisfied before the board authorizes investment in a major new business. One is the primary technology, the primary know-how must be relevant in the new environment. That's obvious. Second one is the distribution channel, the commercial relationships, and so on must carry forward. And the third one is that data must still be an advantage. And the rule which they perfected over the years is if 2 of those 3 are satisfied, they seem to succeed. So as we discussed the third leg with them, data, the key thing we worked on is don't look at data just like what data do I have and what do I think about my data. You have to systematically survey your data, identify gaps like coverage, density. I have a lot of data for these kinds of situations, very little here. What about diversity? Do you have enough diverse data? So firstly, you really have to understand your data from the AI point of view. The second thing is, having identified gaps, you now have to figure out ways of augmenting the data. And we discussed, you can gather more data, you can send samples, and you don't need a lot of samples sometimes. I mean, if you are really doing this systematically, you can sort of say, what is the minimal set of new data that I need to add to my existing data to make the classifications in the new area equally high quality. So it's not a sledgehammer approach. It's a very surgical approach to data. Augment the data through gathering new data. And people are talking about M&A, and we have seen M&A in the past that really are all about acquiring data. And the third one, of course, we discussed synthesis. So number one, understand your data landscape from the point of view of AI and the ability to AI to power your business. Second is understand the gaps from the point of view of filling those gaps, but in a surgical manner. And the third one is really makes me so excited. Given my data, given my ability to acquire data or generate data, what new business can I get into? And that's something that AI can also help. AI techniques can help it. So that's really what I understand your landscape, fill the gaps, but then go further than your existing ambition. So that's really how I see it.
So Vijay, let me ask a dumb question here. When you say survey your data estate, I think that's worth a little bit of an expansion, because I think that's such a fundamental element to really understand your data and look at it. So give a little bit of a thought, share here what you would do if you were the CEO or CIO, CDO, whatever you might be. What would you do in order to survey your data?
Ulli just asked Vijay a great question about surveying data. Like me, I'm sure you're interested in what Vijay has to say. Be sure to tune in to part 2 of this conversation to hear his thoughts. Until then, thank you for watching the Azure Essentials Show.